Despite some rough weather lately, we're really enjoying the life in the archipelago. And we're currently on the island Åstol.
Tomorrow we're leaving Åstol and we'll go to Veggen. The wind is going to pick up tomorrow night, but we really hope we can stay at least a couple of hours at Veggen. It's supposed to be a really cool mooring against the rocks. So we'll see tomorrow if the wind is light or how soon this low pressure is coming in. There was actually a halo around the sun today as well, and it's going to be another low pressure coming in day after tomorrow with some high winds up to 45 knots. So I think we'll have to be in a secure place by then. It's the third low pressure and gale in the last 3 weeks.
Har du en koja där inne? Titt ut! Titt ut! That onion you just chopped must have been really strong. It's like my eyes are tearing up.
It was actually.
The moon! This is the moon that we got in at the Apollo 11 event in Seattle at the Museum of Flight. Now Vera plays with them. It's a perfect little lamp. We have water filters on board to ensure that we get clean drinking water. Here in Sweden, we've been changing them every 5 months or so. But this can vary a lot depending on where in the world you're cruising. We were ready to leave the island, but first we were going to fill up the water tank. Papa. Hey, Papa. Waving goodbye to Åstol. Just a little bit west here of Åstol is an uninhabited island, another big rock, and there is this cut into it, or it's actually like a tiny little island next to it. There is a little sandbar closing it from the west, and we're planning to go in that cut and more. So we'll have rocks on both sides.
I think we have decided not to go in there because the wind is from the side right now, and there's a rock sticking out on the port side of the boat when we go in there, and it could be a problem coming out again, and the wind is going to pick up later today. and Vera isn't too happy at the moment. So I think we'll continue to another anchorage, just a mile or so from here, and spend the night there.
It's a pity because it looks really cool, but I think it's a little bit too much wind to go there for the first time with a boat this size. And especially when the wind comes from the side, so then you will get pushed to the other side, and when you don't know what it really looks like under the water, the surface, it's no, too risky. This is a super narrow passage.
Yeah, but pretty easy with GPS. Imagine sailing here in the 70s or something.
Without GPS.
Yeah.
We picked up a mooring buoy from the Swedish Cruising Association, where we are members. Nu är vi framme!
Nu är vi framme! Nu vet du inte var vi är ju. Är du trött?
Takes a while to get the dinghy down when you haven't used it in a long time. We kind of used it as a storage space. It was actually our dinghy premiere for the year, and we drove into a little island.
Well, this little island is called Sandholmen. Sandy island, I guess. And it must be beautiful here in the summer.
And look at this like natural slide in the rock. It looks like a water slide.
It does. You can actually feel that the wind has picked up a little bit, but it's from the west now, so that's why we couldn't feel it down on that side. West is in that direction, so we're in a bit of a lee down there now. So probably the forecast is correct, and it will increase more during the day. It'll be pretty windy tonight. And that's our destination for today, Skärhamn.
We headed back to the boat, hoisted the dinghy and dropped the mooring line. Skärhamn is a cute little town, and this is a great place to do provisioning, since their grocery store is one of the best we've seen.
So one of the projects that we have left back here is that we need to mount the life raft again. It used to sit on the outside here, But obviously we can't have it there anymore because we have the davits and the dinghy there. So we have to move it somewhere else. And I'm thinking that we can move it up here and mount it in the cradle on the deck here. I just need to do some adjustments on the cradle. Need to cut some of the things off, drill some holes, because under the deck here, if I drill holes through, those bolts will go straight into the garage for the hatch. So it will be pretty easy to reach the nuts on the inside, which will make this job a lot easier. Don't need to lower any roof or anything inside the boat. The only thing I need to think about is that the holes here will go through the core in the deck, so of course I need to seal those holes properly so there won't be any problems in the future with water intrusion in the core. Most of the stuff is now removed, but I'm thinking that I will remove this pipe as well, so that these two bars will be the only surface that have connection to the deck. Otherwise there can be standing water against this pipe, and that's never good.
The papa? We say papa.
The last thing for the day was to measure and drill the holes in the cradle and in the deck.
The job for today is to finish the cradle, and the next thing I need to do is to take up some bigger holes, remove the core and fill that void up with epoxy. And for you guys who saw the episode where we mounted the foot blocks on deck, you remember that I used an Allen key to remove the core and then fill that void up with epoxy. That was okay, but I will make it a bit easier for me now. I will use hole saw instead. Make a bigger hole, fill that void up, and then I will drill through the epoxy with an 8mm drill later on for the bolts. Some of you guys asked me the last time if the epoxy will cure in colder climate. Right now we have 6 to 7 degrees Celsius, so that's no problem. It can go even colder than that, but it takes a very long time for it to cure. So what I will do today is that I will preheat the epoxy before I pour it in there, and hopefully it will be cured by tomorrow, because I want to have this job finished before we leave Skärhamn. I will use this type of epoxy, G-Flex. It's a ready-made epoxy, so you don't need to add anything to it like a thickener. It's a bit more expensive, but it's convenient when you're doing small jobs like this. Why is it always such small spaces? I can just barely touch.
I just don't think I will reach. My arms aren't long enough.
Okay, my arm is long enough, but it's not thin enough.
No, I don't reach.
Ah, shit. I will give it another try, see if I can squeeze my arm in there. Yeah, and if I didn't explain this before, why I need to have tape on the inside, it's because otherwise the epoxy will of course run straight through. So I'll need a tape here to clog the hole until the epoxy has cured. That is how far I can go today with the installation of the cradle. Now the epoxy just have to cure, so I can drill the holes yeah, by tomorrow, I hope.
For lunch we were having pasta with a tomato sauce with carrots and beluga lentils.
Another beautiful day, and I have just checked the epoxy. It's been 18 hours now since I poured it in here, and it's cured. It's hard enough to drill through. I guess it will be a few more days actually before it's reached its full hardness, but this is hard enough to mount the cradle, drill through the epoxy, and do the to seal the holes for the bolts. Still a bit soft, but this will be okay in a few days. Everything is done now for mounting the bolts in the cradle. I don't know if I explained the full reason why you do this with the epoxy and drill through it. The reason is that the whole deck on the boat has a core inside of it, and you absolutely don't want to have water entering into the core. That's just a big mess. So that's why you need to fill up with epoxy and drill through that instead. So if the sealant around the bolt will fail in the future, the only problem you will have is that it will drip inside of the boat and not, you won't get water into the core. So even if this is a lot of work just for a couple of bolts, it's definitely worth doing it. So one thing that is nice to do before you put sealant on is to countersink the holes first. That way you will make sure that the sealant is being pushed in against the bolt, with, in this case, the cradle, when the cradle is pushing down on the sealant from the top. So I always try to do that if it's possible. You can make a pretty big countersink, so there's plenty of room for a sealant. This is solid epoxy all the way through, and then there's a hole drilled through the epoxy. So even if there's water leaking between the bolt and the epoxy, it can't enter into the core. When tightening these bolts, you should always do the tightening on the nut on the inside. So you shouldn't turn the bolt in the hole when you have sealant there, because then you can disturb the sealant, and if you're unlucky, it won't be leak proof. So that of course makes everything in some cases a lot harder, like in this case, because now Malin has to just hold a screwdriver on the outside to keep the bolt still, when I have to turn the nuts on the inside. What do you guys think of it?
I think it looks great. Because, I mean, that space we never use anyway.
I think it looks great. Everything is in place, and also the height is okay, so we will quite easily see above it even if when we sit in the cockpit. And the only thing left to do now is to connect this line. I think it's called painter in English, and because this should always be connected to the cradle, so when you throw the life raft overboard, it's like the mooring line for the life raft, so it won't drift away. And this line is also what's engaging the gas bottle inside of the raft, so it will inflate once it's in the water. It felt good to get that project off the to-do list and to clear up some space on the aft deck.
Hope you enjoyed these 21 minutes of sailing life. Thank you so much for watching.